Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk about the thorny, difficult, problematic, controversial Mahler Symphony Number 10. The one that he didn't complete, the one that never should have been completed, but was completed by lots and lots and lots of people. Oh, this is such a mess. I've been hesitating talking about this because I'm so conflicted, and you should be too. When a composer dies without completing something, that tells us something. And if we really respect them, I believe in most cases, we should just leave it alone. There's enough of what they did. What they did is precious. We should treasure it more, not try to create stuff that they never did. It really, really bothers me. And as time goes on, it bothers me more. There are so many bad completions of things out there. And there's a whole industry devoted to writing music that the composers themselves never did. It's absolutely horrible. Horrible. These completions of Bruckner's Ninth, oh my God, they just suck. They're horrible. Elgar's Third Symphony, oh God, it's a nightmare. It's just atrocious. These parasitical non-beings run around like flies on a corpse, trying to create their own hitchhike, on the reputations of the great artists who preceded them. It all started with Beethoven's Tenth. Remember that? I don't understand it. I really, really don't. We have more than enough music by everybody who mattered, and the fact that some composers wrote less than we may have wanted, too damn bad. Go listen to something else, people. There's plenty of music out there. That's really how I feel about it now. I think all of this completion business is just bad. It's bad for music, and it actually lowers the standards of what we're doing, because it gives this impression that anybody can do it. Any hack who comes along who wants to look at a manuscript and fix it up and puff it around can finish what a great composer couldn't finish themselves. And that isn't true. And the Mahler 10th is a particularly interesting case. At the end of the day, every single one of these cases needs to be considered on its own basis. It has its own set of facts and its own situation. Now, having said all of that, with the Mahler 10th, here's the problem. Mahler knew that he was dying. He knew when he was diagnosed with the infection that eventually killed him, that there was no cure and that he was going to die. He told his wife that the 10th was fully prepared in the sketch and she should do what she wanted, or something like that. There's some story about that. But the bottom line is the piece is complete in terms of melodic continuity from beginning to end. That tells us that it was theoretically completable, depending on who completed it, obviously. And some of it is worth listening to. I think the Adagio is one of the great, great pieces of 20th century music. The Purgatorio is lots of fun, and it works perfectly well. The second movement is somewhat, you could put it together well enough. The fourth movement has continuity issues, and the finale, it seems to me, has a couple of really big problems. The biggest problem with the symphony, in my mind, is that passage in the finale where the screech, the primal scream from the first movement, comes back. That transition from what it was doing to that huge cataclysmic moment has not been worked out. Mahler didn't work it out. If you look at the sketch, there's just a single line. We don't know how he would have approached it or what he would have done in terms of tempo and texture, and nobody, to my mind, has done that satisfactorily. The other big problem with the finale, in my view, is that the ending, the whole passage after that, I'm not sure that Mahler would have left it as it is. It seems to me it just goes on too long. it needs to be cut down somehow, or the ending needs to arrive in a more expeditious manner. Part of that is a function of performance, of course, and how long the conductors just moon about. But I think that there's a lot that they could do. One of the things that really pisses me off about the Mahler completions of the Tenth Symphony is that exactly where Mahler is most innovative, which is in his writing for woodwinds and percussion, that's where most of the completions are the worst. They really are. They're just mostly just dismal as far as that's concerned. And I really think that, and at that part, at least percussion-wise, because I'm a percussionist and I played all these symphonies, that's not too difficult. The thing to do is to be creative, but not excessive, because late Mahler is always very transparent and his handling of instruments is incredibly precise. I don't know. I've heard all these completions. I've heard Carpenter. I've heard Wheeler. I've heard Remo Mazzetti. They're all garbage. They're worthless. They're trash. We should forget about them. I mean, there's Barshai. Oh my God, what a mess that is. He just takes everything but the kitchen sink and throws it in there. You may want to consider these pieces as sort of interesting for their own, whatever advantages they may have. But Mahler, they ain't. Let's not kid ourselves. They just aren't. The best completion remains, in my view, Deryck Cooke. And the reason is because he did the least. He was a sympathetic Mahlerian who did his best to see that as much of what Mahler actually did comes through, and what he didn't do, he's careful about. That doesn't mean it's satisfying. The problematic passages in the fourth movement, in the fifth movement, I don't think Cooke is any more successful than anybody else. But at least he's not obviously going in the wrong direction. You know what I mean? He presents what's there. In that respect, it's an incredibly successful completion, and that is the only one I'm going to talk about, because I have no interest, as I've said, in any of the others. I don't think that they deserve to exist as works of Mahler. So, where are we with recordings? Well, and that's all I have to say about the Mahler 10th. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on and on, but I'm not going to go on and on. That's my position. I think it's perfectly clear. As far as recordings go, there have been quite a few very successful ones. And I think of the Cooke version specifically. Now, we have to start with the old Win Morris, which came out on Philips. It was with the Philharmonia. That sounded really great when it was on Philips. It sounded just awful on CD. I don't know what happened to it. And the play, he did a really quick second movement that I really liked, but the rest of it was kind of scattershot and in typical Win Morrissey fashion. He was sort of all over the place as a conductor. And I appreciate having sort of imprinted on that version of Cooke, but yeah, the heck with it. Forget it. There are other very fine versions. Simon Rattle did it twice. One of the best things he did was his remake with the Berlin Philharmonic. It's a very, very good performance, very coherent, beautifully played. It could use a little bit more weight and a little bit more heft. The Berlin Philharmonic at that point had forgotten how to play loud. It sort of forgot what an orchestra sounds like when it plays together. It's very chamber music-y, but it's a very good performance. It really is. Another very good version that's worth mentioning is Thomas Dausgaard with the Seattle Symphony live on the Seattle Symphony's own label. It's a very quick performance, like 71 minutes, but really lots and lots of conviction and very, very convincing. And, Dausgaard is one of those incomprehensible conductors. He's trying to do different things for the sake of being different. And, he made those ghastly chamber music recordings or chamber orchestra recordings of major romantic symphonies, for BIS and with like the Swedish Chamber Orchestra or whatever they are. Oh, they're just awful. But his Mahler 10th is terrific from Seattle. And that's also worth considering. Those three are sort of out there. But I have here, let me see, how many do I have? Four others that I think are really the ones that are my go-to versions for the Mahler 10th. And I think they're all worth listening to, and they're exceptionally fine. The first is Ormandy Ormandy was the first guy to do the complete Cooke version, and it's still one of the best. And it's the original Cooke version, not the one that was later diddled. I mean, Cooke revised it, and then Colin and David Matthews put their input in it. It was a whole concatenation of people. I really like the original Cooke version, I have to say. I mean, it does do things like throw in the xylophone in the fourth movement, and the end of the first scherzo, dum ba ba ba, da 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 dum. It's absolutely right. It sounds like what Mahler would have done. You know, he took out the cymbal crash later on. They put it back afterwards. All kinds of stuff has been, you know, these little details have been fussed with endlessly. But the Ormandy first version is just a good, straightforward, magnificently played realization of the piece by a top-notch, world-class orchestra. And that's what it needs. That's really what the music demands. And so I really enjoy that performance. And I enjoy its swiftness. I enjoy its not dawdling around and wasting our time with the parts that Mahler didn't write, unlike some other versions, I might add, like James Levine's. Remember James Levine with Philadelphia? He did the Adagio originally in analog, and the rest of it was done in digital. And the analog sounded so much better than the digital. And the whole performance it was very slow and very denatured sounding. It was really kind of a shame because his Philadelphia Fifth was fabulous, you know, and the Ninth was fabulous. But somehow with the technological change and I don't know, it all didn't go right, did it? So forget about Levine. But Ormandy in Philly is great. It's been reissued a couple times. This is the Japanese one that comes with Ormandy's incredibly underrated and also very beautiful Das Lied von der Erde. But you can get the 10th as one of those great performances reissues too. The 10th that really sort of put Cooke on the map as a serious Mahler 10th version was not Wynton Morris, however. And the Ormandy was not internationally available, and nobody took Ormandy seriously as a Mahler conductor, just like they don't take him seriously as a Bruckner conductor, which is a pity because he did great work in both. No, Chailly. This was the one that really got us going on the Mahler 10th. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous performance. Absolutely first class. I think it's a little slow in a couple places, but basically it's a fine, wonderfully recorded, wonderfully played version that presents the music beautifully. The Adagio, the opening Adagio is gorgeous, and the climax of the Adagio, you know, the cataclysmic apocalypse scream thing is just to die for. It's absolutely fabulous. So Chailly is a terrific one to go to. But I have two other versions that are really kind of my go-to performances, despite the excellence of these other ones. And one of them is Michael Gielen. Now, Gielen, you know, as I've always said, Gielen is a you know, nihilistic horror kind of conductor. That's what he likes. He likes music. The more miserable and depressing it is, the more enjoyable he makes it sound. I don't know why. I don't know what his philosophy was. I don't want to know what was going on in his head. But he was one of those guys who thought that life was miserable and ugly and music should be miserable and ugly. And the more miserable and ugly it was, the more truthful it was. And the more truthful it was, the more attention he gave it. And he was a great conductor. And his Mahler 10th is absolutely first class. Absolutely first class. And I think it's because he has the idiom. He understands the piece conceptually as a whole. And that's what the great performances do. You know, if you're going to put over a great Mahler 10th, you sort of have to get past the details of the orchestration, the thinness of the textures, the parts that are unsatisfying, and arrive at a conception for the whole work and know where it's going and know where it's going to go as a whole. And to be quite honest, it seems to me that the cranky old German conductors knew how to do it, because they knew how to do it with like Beethoven and Brahms. I mean, they understood how to see a work whole. You know, I mean, this may shock you to hear it coming from me, but there was a tradition there. I mean, conductors like Furtwängler, for all that I think he was a catastrophe in terms of the incidental detail of these live performances that were released without his authorization and on which his reputation rests. He understood how to see a work complete and show you where it was going. I mean, conductors like that are the ones who do the Mahler 10th best, because the work needs that. That's the kind of help it needs. And I think a lot of the more modern conductors today who are not good with music in sonata form, who don't understand long-range phrasing, how to project a work's span over multiple movements, they have problems. And they're going to have problems with Mahler 10th, because while some works are okay when you sort of stop and smell the roses and, emphasize specific moments at the expense of the whole, I mean, the specific moments aren't there because Mahler didn't always finish them. So you need to have the whole. And the other conductor who really does that, who does it even better than Gielan, who does it better than anybody in the whole universe, is Kurt Sanderling. This is the one, guys, Kurt Sanderling on Berlin Classics, and it's not because he adds a tam-tam whack at the climax of the Adagio. I actually don't like the tam-tam whack. I don't think that Adagio should have any percussion at all. And Sanderling, like everybody, does a little tinkering here and there. He adds a bunch of triangle rolls. He does some, he diddles the textures now and again. But this is one of those performances that is completely, totally, utterly, organically unified. That's what it is. It's a totally integrated conception of the work. And that makes such a big difference in our perception of it, because it has no dead spots. It flows. The pattern of tension and release is 100% convincing. And that's what you need to have in a Mahler 10th. So if you're going to listen to Mahler 10th, and I very seldom do now, I really do. I mean, I actually prefer to just stick to the Adagio and maybe the Purgatorio and not give myself agita over the moments that I know aren't working. I just wish they were. But they aren't. We can't kid ourselves. Until a genius of Mahler's level comes along and does a completion and finds out how to handle those problematic moments, how to deal with the fourth movement, the transitions between sections, how to create the necessary flow, how to deal with the climax of the finale. Until that happens, I would prefer to just put the work aside. But I know that there are many of you who love it, and lots of people who love it. It's getting performed, it's getting recorded, and Cooke's version, I strongly believe, is the only one worth having. And Sanderling's is the prime performance, the one that you have to get to really give the best sense of how the entire work probably would have been shaped and structured, and how it would have flowed had Mahler lived to complete it. So that is my take on Mahler's 10th Symphony. I hope you found it intriguing and helpful. Keep on listening, folks. Take care. Thank you.